Welcome to Dawn of the New Earth. My name is Morgue, and I'm an ex-Christian revealing hidden knowledge to create a new Earth. And today we are taking a look at Satanic Magic. We are continuing to explore Satanism. We're going to start the Book of Belial. I'm going to read some excerpts from the Book of Belial, which is all about Satanic Magic. So what is Satanic Magic? What is magic in general? What is the difference between white magic and black magic? These are all questions we're going to be answering today. It's going to be really good, very interesting stuff, some important stuff as well. So we're going to get started right away, but you know the drill. Please hit like and subscribe. And if you enjoy my content and you want to help me reach more people, become a member here on YouTube by hitting the join button below this video. Hit that button. You can see all the different perks you can get, like access to all our members only videos. There's hundreds of them. Access to our Discord where we have study groups, etc. There's a lot of stuff. Check it out and it helps out a lot. I want to remind you that my third book is available and out right now, which is Cosmogenesis, The Awakening Universe, which describes the evolution of all reality from the beginning of time to the end of time, with the understanding that we are reality, understanding itself. Now, this is book 3 in the Neogenian system. If you don't know where to begin, if you're new, start with book 1. Book 1 is Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. Links to all that is in the description of this video. And in the description of this video, you can also find a link to my Spotify channel, Dawn of the New Earth, where you can follow me there. It's a nice way to be able to listen and experience this podcast. So, my friends, we are talking about Satanic Magic. What is magic in general? Now, we've been exploring Satanism. And the Satanic Bible is divided into 4 parts. The first part was the Book of Satan, which is all about essentially an attack on religion and Christianity specifically, a criticism, an attack, etc. The second is the Book of Lucifer, and the Book of Lucifer describes the philosophy and ideas of Satanism. And now the third book is the Book of Belial, and the Book of Belial describes Satanic Magic. So that's what we're going to be understanding today. What Satanic Magic is, what magic is in general, and I'll tell you, part of it is kind of gross. And I was actually going to skip part of it because I thought, hey, this is gross. I don't want to talk about it. But I did a poll in the chat before we started today's video, and you guys really wanted to hear about it. So we'll also be discussing that element as well. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you'll see what I mean when we get to it. But let's get started right away, okay? So like I said, I'm going to be reading some excerpts from Anton LaVey, who is the founder of the Satanic Church and wrote the Satanic Bible. And so here are LaVey's ideas on what Satanic Magic is. And I'll tell you, I agree with some of it and I disagree with other parts, and we'll be dissecting it bit by bit. And so LaVey says, the greatest appeal of magic is not in its application, but in its esoteric meanderings. The element of mystery, which so heavily enshrouds the practice of the black arts, has been fostered deliberately or out of ignorance by those who claim the highest expertise in such matters. So what is LaVey saying? And I agree with this completely. LaVey is basically saying, when people are interested in magic, they're not actually interested in its application, but in its like secrecy, its vibe, its, all the mystery surrounding it. And he's also saying that this element of mystery completely shrouds magic and the practice of magic, either deliberately or out of ignorance, by those who claim the highest expertise in such matters. So basically he's saying is that those who teach magic usually make it so confusing and so full of secrecy, either on purpose or because they don't know what they're talking about, that it makes it incredibly difficult to even know what the heck magic is. And I agree with this. I'm not saying that everyone, I know some very fabulous magic teachers out there, so it doesn't apply to everyone, but I will say, like, in general, this is why I'm not a huge fan of things like secret societies, etc., because they make it so confusing, so hard to understand, so esoteric, and either deliberately, like intentionally to be manipulative, or because they don't really know what they're talking about. It's frustrating. It's very, very frustrating. And I think that information like this is information that everyone should be able to have access to. And that's what all my books are about, by the way, is making hidden knowledge as easily accessible as possible without all the confusing BS around it. So I agree a lot with LeVay in this aspect. And LeVay continues by saying, if the shortest distance between 2 points is a straight line, then established occultists would do well as maze makers. So essentially, you know, if you want to understand something from point A to point B, and in the simplest way as possible, a straight line, occultists make it a maze. And it really is like that. And it doesn't need to be like that. And it's very confusing. And so we're going to unpack exactly what magic is. So LeVay continues by saying, because remember, this is located in the Book of Belial. So LeVay says, Belial means without a master and symbolizes true independence, self-sufficiency, and personal accomplishment. Belial represents the earth element, and herein will be found magic with both feet on the ground, real, hardcore, magical procedure. So simple, easy, practical. This is what it's about, is basically what LeVay is saying. Now, right away, we could get an understanding of what makes satanic magic different from other forms of magic. There's a lot of forms of magic out there. There's ceremonial magic. There is chaos magic. There is sex magic. There's so many different types of magic that have different practices, different traditions, and different methods, different systems, etc. Now, satanic magic in particular, you can see it's associated with Belial, which is associated with Earth, the material world, and it's about independence, self-sufficiency, and personal accomplishment. So right away, you're going to see that satanic magic is very much focused on practicality, what you can do in the physical world, and it's usually an emphasis on, you know, gaining personal power, independence, personal accomplishment, you know, fortifying the self for the self, essentially, is usually what it's centered around. So it's very earth focused, here and now focused, material focused, etc. Now, this is different than other forms of magic. So there are other forms of magic that are completely the opposite, that aren't about, so Satanism is very much about the self, hedonism, the here and now, indulgence in the flesh. And so magic, their form of magic is going to be orbiting that. But there are other forms of magic that are completely different. You know, magic that's based on like Kabbalah and Gnosticism and Hermeticism. And this is about transcendence. It's about transcending the material, actualizing the eternal aspect, and reaching higher and higher states of consciousness. So you can see there's already a difference here. We're beginning to understand that satanic magic is going to be earth focused. And by the way, if you didn't know, that's why. So if you ever seen the pentagram, I forget if I've mentioned this before, but if you've seen the pentagram represents, you know, the 4 elements, but the very pinnacle, the top point, represents spirit. So the bottom 4 points represent the material elements, and so earth, air, fire, and water, and the top represents spirit. Now, this is why, by the way, that in the satanic pentagram, it's inverted. Spirit is placed at the bottom, meaning the emphasis is on the material world. So you're going to see this very, you know, this is an important distinction about Satanism regarding a focus on the material world. Now, again, the material world is important, absolutely. But at least in my opinion, you need to have both. But Satanism has a real big focus on materialism. But let's continue. So we need to understand what magic is. And so LeVay describes how he defines magic. So how does LeVay define magic? LeVay says, the definition of magic as used in this book is, quote, the change in situations or events in accordance with one's will, which would, using normally accepted methods, be unchangeable. So LeVay is describing magic. as being a change in reality of some kind that is according to your will, which would normally not be changeable without these methods. Now, that is a slightly different definition than the definition that Crowley gives. Aleister Crowley defines magic as very similar, the science and art of causing change according to one's will. Now, how it differs a little bit is that according to Crowley, everything is an act of magic. So Aleister Crowley gives the example of lighting a cigarette. Please don't smoke. Don't do that. It's very bad for you. But that's an example of Aleister Crowley says that, gives us an example of saying even smoking a cigarette is an act of magic because your will is to smoke the cigarette. And so what do? You do a material action. You take the cigarette, you take your lighter, or a match, you strike the match, you put it up, and you do all these actions to cause a change in a reality according to your will. So according to Crowley, everything is really an act of magic. The magician is just more conscious of it than others. So already you can see that magic is not, when it's properly understood, most people don't really understand what magic is, and it gets very confused. And that's what LeVay was kind of pointing at in the beginning when he was talking about everyone who makes it so confusing and hard to understand. Magic isn't about like how you see in Harry Potter or fairy tales or whatever. What magic is simply about making a change in existence according to your will. Whether, like Aleister Crowley said, that's smoking a cigarette or picking up a book or drinking a glass of water, etc. Now, the only, and my definition would be very, very similar. The only caveat that I would maybe add to it, the only qualifier that I would add to it would be that, in my opinion, for one to consider oneself a magician, you need to at least be conscious of the fact that that is indeed what you're doing. That, oh, I am causing reality to change according to my will. Because that shift in perspective is very powerful. Some people will be like, well, what do you mean? What is it? Who gives a shit then? You're just doing everything a normal person would do anyway. What's the difference? The difference is the conscious understanding, the awareness of it. Just like an animal. Like an animal is not self-aware. Some animals have some degree of self-awareness, but for most part, most animals, they're sentient and they can experience emotions, and but they're mostly instinctual. They're not aware of their awareness. They can't plan for. They can't think, oh, next week I think I'm going to go dig up that bone in the park that I hid there the other day. But in the meantime, I'm going to go eat this cup. They don't think that. They're just hungry. They go eat. They feel like digging up the bone. They dig up the bone. Human beings, we have an awareness of that awareness, and so we can make higher choices. So magic is a bit like that. It's about consciously understanding, hey, we have the power to understand reality, I'm sorry, not understand, to transform reality. We have the power to transform reality and make changes according to our will. And by the way, if you're interested in the way I practice changing reality according to will, that will be in my 5th book. There's a section on my 5th book called Will Forming. And will forming is about how to change reality according to your will in what I feel to be a very effective manner. But anyway, I digress. So it's this understanding, that power that it gives you of knowing, wow, I am a master of reality. I am a master of existence. But you see, therein also lies the problem, is that a lot of people who begin to have occult knowledge and magical knowledge, if they don't understand it completely, this can lead to an inflated sense of ego. Because like even what I just said, oh, I'm master of reality. Yes, you are. But people focused on, and this is the danger of satanic magic, because satanic magic is very independent, right? It's about the individual. It's not about the collective. It's about the individual. But it's not just relegated to Satanism. This is a problem for most systems of magic when people don't truly understand what reality is, because you think, oh, I'm the master of reality. These, underlings couldn't possibly understand the power that I have. But really, it should be the mastery of the self for the betterment of the entire world. And we'll get to that a little more as well. But that's an issue, and why I'm always like, well, be careful about these different secret societies and stuff, because you often have a lot of manipulation going on there. And this is why a lot of people who are in very high positions, whether it's like in Hollywood or politics or whatever, not all of them, but a good many of them do have some kind of understanding of esoteric principles. And they've usually understood it in a very manipulative way. Like, oh, we are the leaders and manipulate, we are the good shepherds that must tend to the flock. The sheep are too dumb to understand this, so we have to lead them. They couldn't possibly. And I don't like that mentality. That's I much prefer the mentality of the secret teachings of Christ, which is like, hey, let's bring this message to everyone so that everyone can understand that they're divine and unlock the power within themselves, not lord it over everyone. Anyway, I digress. It's something that annoys me a little bit because these ideas are powerful, and I don't like it when people are manipulative. That always gets under my skin because I grew up in a strict Christian household and I see how manipulative religion is. So I don't like when seeing certain occult systems are manipulative either. Anyway, once again, not all systems are like that. Some are, so just be careful. So, okay. So now we have a little bit of an understanding of what magic is. Magic is about changing reality according to your will. And I would just add to that with the conscious understanding that you know that is what you're doing. And so what about white magic versus black magic now? So LeVay says there's no difference between white and black magic, except in the smug hypocrisy and self-deceit of the white magician himself. In the classical religious tradition, white magic is performed for altruistic, benevolent, and good purposes, while black magic is used for self-aggrandizement, personal power, and evil purposes. But LeVay says, but no one on earth ever pursued occult studies, metaphysics, yoga, or any other white light concept without ego gratification and personal power as a goal. So what LeVay is saying is that there's no difference between white magic and black magic. He's saying that traditionally white magic is understood as that it's altruistic, benevolent, and good, whereas black magic is used for personal power, evil, and self-aggrandizement. And LeVay's saying, well, that's a bunch of BS, because anyone who has ever studied magic or the occult or metaphysics or whatever, anyone who has ever done that has had some amount of gratification to their ego and sought power as a goal, personal power as a goal. So this is how LeVay defines it. LeVay basically says, hey, there is no difference, and it's a bunch of BS and hypocrisy when people try and say that there is. And that's what LeVay says. Now, for me personally, I look at it a little differently. And so for me, white magic is magic that is about, it's anything that empowers the self or the collective that is not detrimental to the collective. In contrast, black magic would be something that may result in personal power, but it's at the detriment, at the expense of the collective. So it would be like, you having some kind of personal gain, but you are damaging others in the process to get that gain. In my opinion, that would be more of the, dark magic, and the more of the light magic would be about you can empower the self, but it's not at the expense of the collective, and you can empower the collective as well. I don't really like getting into too much. I think that I don't often use magical terms because I think it can get kind of confusing. But in general, if we're working in this system and working in this language, that's kind of how I look at it. And so how you can look at it is, someone who, let's say like a dark magician then would be someone who's like a con man, a cheat, someone who uses magic to help them con and cheat, and they might gain a lot of power and a lot of money and a lot of influence, but they're hurting the collective. I'm sure you could think of a lot of assholes in power who are like that, who cheat, con, and manipulate, gain power themselves, but they're at the expense of the collective. Whereas another person can still empower the self, but it's through self-mastery, making the unconscious conscious, working hard at their craft, being talented. And this can still result in personal power and influence and prosperity and money. That can still happen, but it's not at the expense of the collective. So do you see the difference? It's not like some people think, oh, there's different definitions. Some people think, oh, all white magic or light magic is about only the collective, and all black magic or dark magic is about the self. It's not really, in my opinion, that. It's more about, are you hurting others or not? There's nothing wrong with empowering the self, but are you hurting others in the process of empowering the self? Or helping the self ultimately will help the collective if you do it in a positive way, because you are a part of the collective. Okay, but let's continue here. I think we've talked enough about that. So let's see. LeVay says, so according to LeVay, lost my place here. According to LeVay, magic falls into two categories: ritual or ceremonial, and non-ritual or manipulative. So this is how LeVay, let's just talk about how LeVay classifies things. Okay, so LeVay is classifying magic as two categories: ceremonial or manipulative, basically. And he says that ritual magic consists of the performance of a formal ceremony. And this type of magic is sometimes known as greater magic. So something like this would be, if anyone's familiar with like the lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram, anything that involves like a ceremony or a ritual where, you know, you're within a circle reciting certain things and perhaps using paraphernalia and imagining archangels or whatever have you, right? There's some sort of ceremony, there's some sort of process. This is ceremonial magic. And but then LeVay is talking about non-ceremonial or manipulative magic, sometimes called lesser magic. And so this is, you're going to see LeVay is going to focus on this lesser magic for a minute. Okay. So right now, what we're talking about here is not ceremonial magic. It's this manipulative magic. And right away, you're going to see that Satanism can very much involve what I would classify as black magic or dark magic, because, and that's one of the things that is not, in my opinion, great about Satanism. And remember, I have nothing against Satanism. It's just, I feel, in my opinion, there are certain flaws. And this is one of the flaws in Satanism, is that it's very much focused on the individual, because it's a very materialist philosophy. It's the idea that reality is material and that's all there is. And there's no afterlife. There's no metaphysical existence. There's just the here and now. So let's make the most of the here and now. So if you're in that mindset of let's make the most of the here and now, this is the only life we got, let's party, let's have fun. Well, then the collective doesn't really matter, because it's like, well, I'm just here today, gone tomorrow. Who really cares about that? It's just, let me make, you know, I just want power myself and make my life better. And so there can be a lot of manipulation within satanic magic that happens at the expense of the collective. Now, that's not necessarily true. Not every Satanist engages in that, but that's very much permissible or part of Satanism. And you can see where that mindset, there's no reason why it shouldn't be if you're coming to it from that mindset. And that's why it's important to understand, you know, why like in our system, we come to the understanding of reality that there is a metaphysical layer to reality that underpins everything, and that ultimately we are all expressions of the absolute having individual experiences. So we don't want to hurt the collective, because everything is a reflection of ourselves. So for me to hurt you is to hurt myself, because I'm you from another aspect and you're me from another aspect. So right away, you can see why with that. And see, this is why it's important to have an understanding of reality before you try and manipulate reality. Because if you're trying to manipulate reality, you have to understand what reality is, or you're going to hurt yourself, even through the means of hurting other people. If you hurt other people, you're ultimately hurting yourself, because you don't realize that's your absolute self. So there needs to be an understanding of what reality is. And that's a big distinction between what I talk about in my book, specifically in will forming. It's very important to understand what you're doing and how it affects existence as a whole, because our reality is a system of frequencies, and every little ripple you make permeates across all existence and affects everything. and everything is what we are. So we have to be very careful and conscious of what we are before we start changing and transforming things. But anyway, I digress. So LaVey here is talking about this manipulative magic or lesser magic, and he says it consists of the wile and guile obtained through various devices and contrived situations, which when utilized can create change in accordance with one's will. In older times, this would be called fascination, glamour, or the evil eye. So what is this really talking about? Now, this is interesting, and I think this will give a demonstration of how magic can work, how it can operate. So LaVey starts to talk a little bit about the witch trials and the witch burnings. And so according to LaVey, he says, most of the victims of the witch trials were not witches. He says most of the real witches were sleeping with the inquisitors. So according to LaVey, he's saying that the real witches were so adept at magic that they were right under the noses of the inquisitors, sleeping with them and manipulating them to such a high degree that they weren't tried as witches. That's what he said. So LaVey says, this is the origin of the word glamour. The antiquated meaning of glamour is witchcraft. The most important asset to the modern witch is her ability to be alluring or to utilize glamour. The word fascination has a similarly occult origin. Now, this is very, very interesting. And this is true in such a way, it doesn't just apply to women, but applies to anyone, is that the making your appearance is an act of magic. And you can set a certain appearance to get certain results. Like if you're going to a job interview, if you show up in a shirt with a bunch of holes in it, you aren't going to get the result that you want. If, however, you show up in a suit and a tie or, dressed for whatever the job is, you are more likely to get that job. You're more likely to have reality go towards your will. So the way you dress, the way you behave, the way you act are all acts of magic. It's just about consciously realizing it. Now, LaVey goes further here. So LaVey gets into like some real manipulative territory where it's like, oh yeah, as a woman, he's using a woman as an example. You can essentially dress in a very sexualized way to manipulate men and get what you want. I'm not saying that this is ethical, but this is what LaVey is talking about in terms of using glamour as magic. And so LaVey says to manipulate a person. See, it's so much about manipulation. A lot of satanic magic is about manipulation. And and it's because it's so individual focused rather than collective focused. But to manipulate a person, you must first be able to attract and hold his attention. The three methods by which the command to look can be accomplished are the utilization of sex, sentiment, or wonder. So right now he's talking about in terms of a witch trying to manipulate a man. This is what LaVey is describing right now, like a satanic witch trying to manipulate a man or an individual in general. And this is how LaVey is describing it. So the first category, that of sex, is self-evident. If a woman is attractive or sexually appealing, she should do everything in her power to make herself as enticing as possible. Once she has gained the man's attention by using her sex appeal, she is free to manipulate him to her will. So, is this an effective form of magic? Yeah, it is. And I mean, you can see this form of magic everywhere, especially if we look at capitalism. The power of sex is used to sell everything from toothpaste commercials to hamburger commercials. The power of sex is used to manipulate people consciously or unconsciously. Now, we want to make, this is what LaVey is talking about. We want to make sure that, of course, we are being ethical about these things, okay? So, you know, have that. This is why it's important to understand what existence is before one starts engaging in this sort of idea, because it can get really out of control. And like I said, a lot of people at the top have these occult and esoteric understandings, and you can see we can get a really shitty world when people don't understand exactly what we are, where we are, and why we're here, but have some form of understanding of how to manipulate using these techniques and tactics. Okay, so that's that. So LaVey described that as being, you know, the aspect of sex as a form of lesser magic. Now, but there's others, which is sentiment. And he says usually older women fit into this category of using sentiment. And he gives the example, this would include the cookie lady type of witch, and who might live in a little cottage and be thought of as a bit eccentric. By conforming to an image of the sweet old lady next door, she can employ the art of misdirection to accomplish her goals. So essentially, if you act like the nice little sweet old lady next door who bakes cookies, you can secretly use that to be manipulative. And see, like a lot of the satanic magic is very much focused on manipulation, which is, in my opinion, not the best thing to be focused on. But you could see how one could use these principles in a positive way. It doesn't have to be nefarious. One could see how to use these principles in a way that is ethical. It's just LaVey likes to be really, like, you'll see this throughout his whole book. This is one of the things I didn't really love about Satanism personally, is that LaVey likes to be really shocking, and I think sometimes he does it like too much, just like shock for the sake of shock, like, oh, I'm super evil. And it's like, well, okay, but let's actually be practical here. This is actually not the best way to do things. This is not actually super ethical. But anyway, and so there's sex, there's sentiment, and then wonder. And this would apply to the woman who is strange or awesome in her appearance. By making her strange appearance work for her, she can manipulate people simply because they're fearful of the consequences should they not do as she asks. So this is someone who might dress in a certain way, you know, maybe someone who dresses very, very witchy with all these different symbols and occultism, and people are like, wow, she must know what she's talking about. She must know what she's doing. And so she's able to have that power in this way. And you can see where these ideas are very powerful ideas. And I'm not saying that this stuff is necessarily wrong. You just have to be very conscious about how you're using it. It's like anything else. These powers exist. How are you going to use them? Are you going to use them for a better world and a better self? And that's ultimately what matters. Are you going to use these forces for a better you and a better us? Or are you going to use them for a better you at the expense of the us? And that's just what we need to think about when we engage in these practices. So now LaVey was talking more about women. He switches a little more to men now, talking about a warlock, a satanic warlock. And basically he says it's very similar. The handsome or sexually appealing man would naturally fit into the category of sex. The sentiment category would appeal to the older man who has an elfin or forest wizard appearance, or, you know, a bunch of those like old gurus with long beards, and people think that they have something smart to say just because they look really old and wise, but maybe they don't. And the third type would be the man who presents a sinister or diabolic appearance. And LaVey was a good example of someone who chose that. LaVey picked a very diabolical and sinister appearance, and he was extremely effective. LaVey in Satanism was and has been extremely popular and has caused a lot of change in the world. So LaVey, despite the fact that I don't agree with a lot of stuff that LaVey says, he was very effective, and he had a powerful form of magic. Again, doesn't mean I agree with all of it, but that's the case. Now, by the way, one thing that I want to mention is, like I said, there's lots of different types of magic. We're talking about specifically satanic magic right now. But if you guys want to hear me talk about other types of magic, let me know in the comments, because in the chat, someone asked me about chaos magic and sigils. And if that's something that you would like me to talk about, if you want to hear me talk about chaos magic and sigils, or even other types of magic, or even how to make a sigil, tell me in the comments, let me know, because sigil work is very interesting. We could do a video on how to make one. It has to do with, having a certain goal in mind and putting that into a form of a symbol so it becomes embedded in your unconscious, making your intention very strong. Anyway, if you want some ideas on that, let me know, because what we're talking about here is specifically satanic magic, but there's a many different types. So anyway, just let me know. But here we get to the part that I did not want to talk about. I had planned to skip this because I just find it's kind of gross. But everyone in the chat was like, "Oh no, we want to hear you talk about it." So let's talk about this. So LeVay says odor is another important manipulative factor in lesser magic. Remember, animals fear and distrust anyone or anything that doesn't smell. So now LeVay is going to talk about how to use odor or smell in manipulative kinds of magic. And so LeVay says, if you are a man and wish to enchant a woman, allow the natural secretions of your body to pervade the atmosphere immediately around you. So in other words, don't take a shower, don't bathe. And LeVay continues by saying, if you as a woman wish to bewitch a man, do not fear that you might offend simply because the oils and fragrances of your flesh have not been scrubbed away, or that place between your thighs is not dry and sterile. In other words, once again, he's saying don't take a bath. These natural odors are the sexual stimulants which nature, in her magical wisdom, has provided. So once again, you can see how satanic magic is very much about the flesh, about the human experience, about the animalistic aspect of humanity. It's about, let all those natural odors, come out so that the pheromones can mingle and people will be attracted to you or whatever. I'm not a proponent of this. I think that's kind of gross. But hey, if that's your thing, no judgment. That's fine. Just not my thing. I'm much more about transcending it's nice to be animalistic and engage in, human activities, but I don't know, just not my thing. Satanic magic can have it. That's why I'm not a Satanist. But anyway, that is essentially the rundown of the big picture of satanic magic, specifically manipulative or lesser magic. But we have more kinds of magic that we are going to talk about regarding Satanism. Has more because we didn't even talk about satanic rituals or anything like that. We were just talking about the lesser magic or manipulative magic. So next week, we will most likely talk about ritual work in terms of Satanism and what that is about, or what the greater magic in Satanism is about, because this was just about lesser magic. So that's most likely what we will talk about next week. But like I said, in the comments, tell me if you want to know about other types of magic, like chaos magic or, sigil work or ceremonial or whatever you'd like. Let me know. Tell me, because I'm very interested in what you guys are interested in, what you would like to hear about. And as always, hey, if you enjoy my work, please like and subscribe. And if you want to help me reach more people with this information and help my channel grow, become a member on YouTube. Hit the join button to see all the different stuff you can get. Members only videos, Discord server, study groups, etc. It's great. Helps out a lot. And as a reminder, if you want to know more about the Neogenian system, the system that I promote and adhere to, check out Neogenesis, Dawn of the New Mind. This is book 1 in the Neogenian system. The link is in the description of this video. And I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports. I appreciate you all very much, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, DB, Nusalina, Christopher, Eon, Vanessa, and Dallas. Thank you very much.